So I'm Patrick Heffernan. I'm a practice manager at Technology Business Research, and I'm here with my three colleagues, Allan Krans, Geoff Woollacott, and Ezra Gottheil. We're going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the technology of business. This is our third go-round, second time with these two guys. What we're trying to do is share insights, information, thoughts that we're having as this pandemic continues to develop. So the first person we'll go to today will be Allan Krans. Allan?
Great, thanks. So a couple weeks into the pandemic outbreak, especially in the US, and what we're seeing is from the customer side, really kind of confirmation of what we had expected, that anything not related to COVID-19 has been put somewhat on the back burner, not necessarily canceled at this point, as businesses kind of feel out the true financial ramifications of this, but certainly a shift in priorities. And so initially there was a lot of that work from home build out, both on the device as well as the network side. And now we're starting to see really what's happening longer term. And I think unanimously, with all the customer conversations that I've been doing, folks are either happy that they had invested in digital transformation over the past couple of years, or planning to do a lot more of that coming out of this on the back end, to be ready, not just for downturns or challenges like we're experiencing now, whether they be from weather or economy or health, as we're seeing right now, but also more flexible with their business to change based on the dynamics that develop. I think that's one thing that no one could have predicted this, and the impact is much different than they would have expected, and some of the other challenges they've gone through over the past two decades. In terms of the vendor side, really kind of divided up into, on the cloud side, the platform vendors have been seeing big spikes in demand. Even if they don't provide collaboration solutions, most of them are hosting some of their partners' collaboration solutions, and so a lot more demand on resources and networking to make that happen. And we are starting to see signs of stress on those data centers. Microsoft, particularly in Europe, has been not meeting their SLAs, experiencing poor performance outages for customers. And so that's even despite some of the metering solutions they've been putting in place, trying to share the resource best they can, prioritize existing customers and mission critical workloads. From some of the customer interviews we've been doing, that's a challenge for them to identify and know what's mission critical, who's in the healthcare sector, so that they can make sure that those things are delivering the insights that first responders in healthcare need. So it's definitely been a challenge. And so you're seeing some signs of stress even for the large hyperscalers to scale up and meet those needs. And so we think you can't respond to that very quickly, at least from their own data centers. So we're hearing reports of co-location being a short-term fix for them to access facilities that are already built and be able to scale, as it looks like we're going to be in this state at least for weeks, if not for months to come, in terms of the usage. On the application side, we got the first inkling of how this is impacting business. SAP released preliminary earnings as a result of the impact of COVID-19 to provide guidance, and their licensing business took a big hit. That's been declining over the years anyway, but they noted it was more pronounced as customers delayed short-term buying decisions and at least at this point postponed them. They are in a much better position due to the subscription base. I think they're up around 74% subscription-based revenue for them. So that's going to provide a buffer, but really they reported that impact on the licensing business, and also downgraded their guidance for the coming year. That's really the first glimpse into a full quarter's impact, at least on my coverage area. And so, it could be a sign of things to come as more earnings are announced in the next couple of weeks. So we'll wait for that.
Thank you, Allan. Hi. This is Ezra Gottheil. I'm the principal analyst for the devices and IoT practices at TBR. I'm not sure if you can see me now. Let's try. Oh, I can. Good. We are getting evidence that bore out and amplified some of the trends we were spotting when we last spoke. So in the world of devices, there has been a sharp spike in demand for computers, for notebooks particularly, such that it's straining the supply chain. Now, that's not entirely because the supply chain has been negatively affected by the virus. There had already been a shortage of CPUs, and of course, the supply chain is tuned to minimize inventory, as Tim Cook famously said, inventory is evil. Under those circumstances, a sudden and unanticipated increase in demand is challenging the supply chain, and customers are having to take pretty much what is available. Certainly, we're seeing an enormous growth in Chrome being used in schools. It's not clear whether we're yet seeing an increase of Chrome being used in business. That's something we've predicted, and I think it's possible. When you have a remote employee who's really not using applications but basically using the web, then Chrome is an easier to maintain solution at a distance. In all cases, companies that were already following trends, and this is like digital transformation, benefited from those trends, because in the world of PCs, those trends have been to facilitated remote deployment. Microsoft introduced autoplay, a way of basically not having to touch a PC and have it configure itself on the desktop back in 2018, and the vendors have been pushing a view of supporting PCs that involve far less physical presence. It's an expensive way to support PCs, reducing the load on IT people and reducing the travel and other kinds of costs. So those companies that were already doing that are benefiting. Still, in a lot of cases, it makes sense to have the PC touched at least once, and the major vendors have been doing that for years, pre-configuring PCs. So they're continuing to pre-configure, or at very least make the necessary identity adjustments they need to make to provide a secure connection with things like VPNs, corporate VPNs. But that one implementation then provides a PC that can be sent out and delivered to a remote worker. Companies have also been seeing an increase in demand for better support services. One of the companies said that our demand has gone up 40% in just 2 weeks. So customer companies are sending out these PCs and saying, we want you to be able to work. We're going to get you the best possible vendor-provided support services. And what we're seeing there is a support network that is in many cases working from home, being used by support customers who are in turn working from home. This is a wonderful sign of a robust economic activity that fits the new normal. Going forward, we still anticipate quite a slump in PC sales, but 1Q20 and possibly 2Q20 are going to look pretty good. The reason for that slump is this market, the device market, is extremely sensitive to global economic activity, as deferring the renewal of a PC is always possible. If you're not adding staff, you don't have to buy one, and if you have release staff, even when you start bringing people in, you've got PCs on the shelf that you can distribute to them. We have seen remarkable numbers out of the various providers of network applications. Of course, as you can see, Zoom is one of them. Google has been under a lot of demand for its educational capacity, and it brought up Google Classroom in Italy in a remarkably short period of time. Still, the long, medium, and long-term future of the device market has a lot to do with the overall global economic activity. As more people are brought back to work, there'll be a need for these things. There will, we believe, be devices that are specifically aimed at helping you collaborate remotely. We think that the working from home was already a big trend that has been accelerated by this, just as minimal deployment requirements is a big trend that has been accelerated by the coronavirus crisis. And going forward, there will be technology answers and service answers to help support those things. The supply chain for PCs is being very stressed. Again, there were some shutdowns. There are also pre-existing CPU shortages. This crisis should actually help with adoption of the well-reviewed new AMD processors, but lots of organizations do not want to support two sets of processors in their organizations. So there's a lot of resistance in larger companies to adopting AMD, even if it performs adequately well. But that supply chain was tuned and it's being stressed, and we expect it to be continued strain until the demand falls off, in which case companies are going to be dialing that back, and that in turn is going to dial back some of the largely Asia-based activity. I'll hand it off to my colleague Geoff Woollacott. We'll talk about data center.
Yeah, hi, this is Geoff Woollacott. I'm a strategy consultant, principal analyst at TBR, and I'm kind of a jack of all trades, filling in while our data center lead is on maternity leave. I've written a blog that went out today called Between Trapezes, which seeks to address the impacts around the data centers, which to me have a ubiquitous set of definitions between a traditional data center, an edge compute environment, co-location centers, and of course the cloud that Allan has touched on. So when I'm taking a look at this, if you head up the food chain, the first place to take a look, we're going to be eager at TBR to be taking a look at the first quarter results, more specifically the Q&A, when the Wall Street folks will be digging away to find out what they can expect to have happen. We'll be looking at it too to make those forecasts. But clearly the first step in the headwaters is how well the Intel and AMD do. Then the question becomes, does it go into the OEM supply that typically goes into data center and edge, or does it go over to the ODM side for the exascalers? And what does that mean in terms of revenue, profit, et cetera, down the food chain, particularly for the single tier, two tier distributor base that, it runs at about 2% operating income. They don't have the, they haven't got a lot of room if the brakes get tapped ahead of them. So it'll be interesting to see what will happen there. You can expect some consolidations in the VAR base. Again, those types of things are all trends that have been going on, and what is happening as we're kind of between the trapeze bars, as they say, just accelerates those moves. The rest of the quick time here, I want to talk sort of in more general terms about business. Like, what is it that looks like the right things to do? And the first thing is senior leadership needs to just stay close to the middle management tier. And the reason why I say that is we've had a 12-year economic expansion. There isn't a middle manager with, less than 12 years of experience in business who's ever had to experience any kind of a downturn, let alone what we're going through now. So the steady hands that have seen these things can draw upon the analogies. If I came out in the 82 recession, the 87, economic meltdown, the dot-com implosion, 9/11 and 08, 09. There's 4 or 5, and I can even remember the 74 oil embargo. But those things, those experiences, to be able to assure folks as we're getting through these things that it's okay and we'll come out of it. We'll come out of it in the fourth industrial revolution, and we're hearing this from all those who have spoken before me, in terms of the need for chips, for compute in order to enable society and keep it going. It will be a better world when we get out of this. And to the strategists that are working on the Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 use cases and trying to make sure, see what the demand is, start looking for those things. They're already bubbling up, at least in the headlines of things I try to consume as I still try to keep my, get my daily work done. One of which is the idea of sort of robotic grocery stores, something that Bezos is, very good at, maybe Whole Foods goes. But the ability to kind of protect society, protect their own employees, and still deliver value and service in an efficient way rather than, having people waiting outside to minimize the number of people in stores. All these things will be pressure to move forward. So those who can, strategy is really now firefight of tactics. People who can find those things and push them forward will be able to weather this better. I'm not saying necessarily grow. I'm saying weather it better. But we're between trapeze bars. We'll get a better idea of how it's coming into view or how far away it is after these 1Q earnings. Whatever the 1Q forecasts are probably will not be as dire as it will wind up being in the second quarter, because we've really only had a quarter of this sort of cessation. I'm not going to call it a recession or anything else. Right now, it's a cessation. And once it reactivates, we'll be able to tell if it's a recession, a depression, or all of a sudden pent-up demand to business as usual. And that really comes to the cash flows of the businesses and who's there and who isn't. There will be opportunities. There'll be opportunities and services for those that are a little bit behind the curve on digital transformation to catch up to those who are ahead of the curve, had the operating profit that comes from digital transformation because of improving the efficiency. And then there will be some that will exit. But the question is, how severe will those exits be? And will that be absorbed, at least for the labor base, as well as for the activity, by those that have transformed ahead of it or are able to now attach into services and get moving? Here at TBR, where anything you hear in here, if you disagree with it, by all means, please let us know. We're all learning. We're all in discovery mode right now. And with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick and the services groups, because those are the ones really oftentimes at the tip of the spear to merge business application with technology and how it can get going.
Yeah, thanks, Geoff and Ezra and Allan. I'm actually going to use something each one of you said and sort of skip across just to talk very briefly about what we're seeing from the IT services vendors. And Allan, you mentioned that anything that's not COVID-19 related right now is set to the back burner. And the flip side to that is anything that can be COVID-19 related is being accelerated. We spoke earlier this week with PwC, who's rolling out a solution to help their clients understand how productivity is going to be influenced by remote working. So Ezra, you talked about the push towards work from home. The question with work from home is, are you really being productive? But before you even get to that, it's, can you be productive? Do you have the tools? Are you connected? Are you safe? Do you have everything that you need to actually do your job? So that's exactly what PwC has gone after, with the idea that it's useful now in this pandemic time, and it's going to be useful when work from home and work remote is so much more widely adopted. Where it sort of set off alarm bells for me, Geoff, is when you talked about the reaction of Wall Street to the earnings and the questions that they're going to get during this earnings cycle. And one of the questions is going to be, how do you ensure that your people are actually being productive when they're working remotely? And PwC right now can probably step in and say, hey, we have an answer for that. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see how rapidly the services vendors, and particularly the consultancies, are able to take advantage of, and I mean that in a good way, I guess, take advantage of the opportunities that are going to be littered all over the place as this pandemic continues and the chaos and the confusion around it continues. We always talk about consultants as loving chaos and confusion. Well, this is a little more uncertainty than most of them are used to. But Geoff, to your point on middle management not being ready for this, yeah, that's going to be the biggest challenge that we're going to see, I think, in the near term, beyond the actual challenges of dealing with the pandemic itself. So on that note, we'll wrap it up, and we'll come back and do this again next week. And as Geoff mentioned, he had a special report out. Allan's had a couple out. Ezra's had a couple out. We've been cranking them out pretty consistently. So look at those and then send us your questions, and we'll go from there. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.